right, 5 minutes after 10 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in. We talk to a lot of experts on this show, and for just about 30 seconds, I want to be an expert, all right? I'm going to be an expert on doing talk shows. I'm just going to tell you one thing. If you ever want to do a radio talk show, and you have an invitation to speak to somebody from the Discovery Institute, take the opportunity to bring that person on the air with you. You are going to love the interview. You may not agree with what they say. I always happen to agree with what they say, but I guess everybody's different. But you definitely will have some great conversation. On the phone right now is a great example of this. I'm looking forward to this next interview with Wesley J. Smith. If you're looking at the podcast, that is Mr. Smith on the photo there, or Dr. Smith perhaps. He is a bioethicist. He's among the world's foremost critics of assisted suicide and utilitarian bioethics. He was named by the National Journal as one of the nation's top expert thinkers in bioengineering. And by the way, if you don't know what that is, we're going to ask Mr. Smith in just a second. He's a contributor to Newsweek, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, USA Today, Forbes, the Weekly Standard, the National Review. He's a Discovery Institute Senior Fellow. And among other things, as far as a reason, we don't really need a reason to have somebody from the Discovery Institute on the air with us. We just love the information they bring us. But January is National Slavery and Human Trafficking Prevention Month. And we think of slavery sometimes in this country as something that's long and gone, but it's not. It's still out there. It's in other countries. It's in this country, believe it or not. And so we're going to learn about that right now. Good morning, Wesley Smith. And forgive me, I'm stumbling over whether to call you Dr. Smith or Mr. Smith.
How about Wesley?
All right, Wesley. Well, thank you for being on the air with us. And I believe you have been with us before.
That could be, and that was very kind of you, what you said about the Discovery Institute. I have to say that my colleagues are very, very, as you mentioned, intelligent, and we come at our issues as honestly and with as much integrity as we possibly can. So I appreciate your kind words.
Absolutely. Now, you have so many things you could talk intelligently about. Did you want to focus on the human trafficking?
Well, let's start there, and then we can go where you take it. The Human Exceptionalism project, of which I'm the director, seeks to promote the idea, because it's under attack in many, many areas, about the unique and intrinsic dignity of human life. And there are two aspects to that. It's not just the sanctity of human life, which is part of it, but it is that each and every human being has equal inherent moral worth simply and merely because we are human. In other words, we do not have to earn our equality or our rights to some form of criteria, such as in bioethics, where many in bioethics are saying being human is not what gives value, it's being what they call a person, and that in order to be a person, you have to have certain capacities, such as being able to value your own life. We probably don't have time to get into that in detail, but that leads to a pernicious, invidious discrimination, because in this view in bioethics, there's such a thing as a human non-person. For example, somebody like my mother, who died of Alzheimer's, in this view, at toward the later part of her disease, would have been deemed a non-person and of lower value. The second part of human exceptionalism, which rejects obviously the inequality and invidious distinctions, the second part is that as we are the only truly moral species in the known universe, we are the only species which understands concepts of right and wrong and has a understanding of the idea of ought. And that means we have duties. And one of our duties is to never treat another human being as an object. We are all subjects. And nothing could be as pernicious in terms of treating other human beings as an object, which is evil, as slavery and human trafficking. And as you pointed out, a lot of people believe that, that's, from the antebellum period and before the Civil War, and there's no more slavery here. And unfortunately, that's not true. Now, the nature of slavery has changed. It's not racial anymore. In fact, if anything, it's focused on women and girls, because most of it is involved in sex trafficking and sex industries. According to experts in the field and the people who work this 100% of the time, there are 20 to 30 million slaves in the world today. And the U.S. State Department estimates that 600 to 800,000 people are trafficked across international borders every year. 15 to 20,000 of which occur here in the United States, and these people who are trafficked and who are enslaved, you don't see them like you did before the Civil War. They're in the shadows. They're kept isolated, and you may not know it. But the whole thing is evil. Unfortunately, the person who I wish was doing this interview was my late colleague and wonderful friend and co-director of the center, John R. Miller. Now, John died a few months ago, so he obviously can't do this interview. But he was George W. Bush's State Department ambassador fighting human trafficking. He had a depth of knowledge and understanding on this subject that just couldn't have been beat. I once asked John, what is the worst thing you saw in your work in the State Department fighting slavery? And he said, he went along on a rescue, and he said, I once saw children hanging in bamboo cages. Can you imagine? Can you imagine?
Yeah. You know, I can I say something? One of the things I appall is, I'm appalled by, I guess is the way to say that, is arrogance. And in this cult, in our world, we have this, I guess, false belief that certain people are more important than other people, and usually importance has a dollar sign attached to it. And when you talk about children who are being used as sex object by people who probably pay for that, quote, privilege to be able to do that. I mean, you're talking about real arrogance. I mean, if there's a God in heaven, you know these people should be going to hell. How is it possible that you think money somehow gives you the right to have sex with a child or a woman who doesn't really want to have sex? That doesn't even... Oh, my gosh. I don't know how God can be forgiving. I would never be a good God.
Listen to this. The average age of a teenager enters the sex trade in the United States between the ages of 12 and 14. Many are runaway girls who were sexually abused as children. And so what happens is these children run away, and they are befriended, quote unquote, right, by the sex traffickers who kind of promise to take them in and then exploit them. And it's really a pernicious thing. So if anybody in your audience, by the way, is a consumer of pornography, it is quite possible that they have promoted the sex trade industry, because a lot of these people, traffic people, end up in pornographic films. If you go to prostitutes, you may be not only doing that in terms of morality, but you may also be furthering sex trafficking, because that's where a lot of this occurs. 80% is in the sex industries. 80%, are women, and most of that is into the sex industries. Let me. The good news is the government. Now, President Trump declared this month, January, which we're coming to the end of, the National Human Trafficking and Slavery Prevention Week. He's not the first president to do that. I'm not saying that it was just Trump, but it's important because Trump has a way of focusing attention like a few other presidents, in my opinion. And there's something called the Blue Campaign out of the Department of Homeland Security that seeks to combat human trafficking, and they've given a list of how to spot. Now, realize this is, as we said, this is all happening in the shadows and it's private, but there are rescues even in this country and elsewhere every year from people who are trafficked and who are slaves. And if I could, I'd love to give you the indicia, if you will, of whether somebody might be trafficked.
Okay.
Physical. Does the person show sign of physical and or sexual abuse, physical restraint, confinement, or torture? Does he or she appear to be deprived of food, water, sleep, medical care, or other necessities? Do they lack personal possessions? Does the person work excessively long and unusual hours, show sudden or dramatic changes in behavior, act fearful, anxious, depressed, submissive, tense, or nervous and paranoid, defer to another person or speak to allow this other person to speak for him or her, appear to be coached on what to say, appear disconnected from family, friends, community organizations, or places of worship, not have the ability to freely leave where they live. And what the government urges people, if you think you've come across somebody who might be trafficked in that way, do not approach the trafficked person yourself. Do not approach the trafficker. These are dangerous. The traffickers are very dangerous people, and as you pointed out, they're evil people. But there is a government hotline that you can call confidentially to let them know you think there's a trafficking circumstance. I'd love to give you that number.
Yes,
it's
please.
866, it's toll free, 866-347-2423. 866-347-2423. And sex trafficking can be hotel-based commercial sex, fake massage businesses, street-based commercial sex, brothels, women being forced to work truck stops, escort services, and for labor trafficking, which is still about 20%, domestic workers, traveling sales crews, health and beauty services, restaurants, construction. Sometimes you'll find these trafficked people in these circumstances. One of the things I think is important to understand, let's say you need to get some kind of work done around your house, and you go to people in your area who are bona fide contractors, and let's say they're saying $10,000 for whatever the work is, and then somebody says, well, I'll do it for $3,000. You know, I'm not saying you shouldn't do it for $3,000, but maybe you should be suspicious that the reason that person can do it for $3,000 potentially is that they're using laborers that don't get paid. So these are just things we can all be considerate of, and also I think it's always better to use somebody who is clearly bona fide than try to play the angles, because you never know what's going to happen in that circumstance.
Well, and here's the hard pill to swallow. I mean, you just basically identified all of us as potential supporters of slavery without realizing it, I mean.
Yeah, of course. I don't think most people, maybe some, but most people would not intentionally support slavery. But a lot of us think, well, I'll just, grab this benefit of the angle, play the angle. And sometimes it leads, you're actually supporting very bad things. By the way, some of your listeners may be trafficked people. And there's a wonderful organization that tries to help get trafficked people out of these horrible circumstances. It's the National Human Trafficking Hotline, and there's a number that trafficked people can call. So if anybody's listening who finds themselves in this awful circumstance and they feel there's no hope, if they can get to a phone and call this number. There's also, if you don't speak good English, there's translators available for other languages. And here's the number: 1-888-373-7888, 1-888-373-7888. And if you're a victim, and if you think you've spotted a trafficking circumstance, alert the government. 1-866-347-2423, 1-866-347-2423. And again, slavery is here. I was recently on a speaking tour of Texas, as an example. I was brought to medical schools and law schools to talk about the bioethical issues in which I engage. And my sponsor just happened to say, we were talking, and they said, do you know that I was in Houston? And they said, did you know that one of the centers of sex trafficking, human trafficking in the country is Houston, Texas?
Wow.
I said I had no idea. And then I saw when I was dealing with this issue for the month, I found out that Texas, the Dallas-Fort Worth area, is also an area where there's a lot of human trafficking that takes place, and so you think, well, could it possibly be in my community? Yes, it could. It's also in big cities: Chicago, Los Angeles, San Diego, San Francisco. San Francisco, I used to live in that area, has a terrible human trafficking issue. So it is around here, and we all, I think, owe it to our brothers and sisters to be alert to the potential, and if
Absolutely,
we happen to come across it, to try to help prevent it.
And what's really disgusting are the people that seek these kind of services out because they get excited by this situation and circumstance, and they'll fly all over just to have sex with underage people, and they know in their heart that they are trafficked.
And a lot of people who do that go to places like Thailand, which is awful. But it also happens in the United States. There's an associated thing that isn't human trafficking. I call it biological colonialism. And what that is when people from very well-off places exploit the destitute for their own purposes. And one of these is in organ purchasing, where somebody needs a kidney and they don't want to wait here. I understand that it's very difficult to be in a waiting line when your life may be at stake. But and so rather than wait, they'll go to poor places like the Philippines or Bangladesh or Pakistan, and they will pay a very destitute, desperate person $5,000 or $6,000 for a kidney, or perhaps more by going through a middleman.
Oh, wow.
It's gotten so bad that Pakistan actually had to pass a law that said there can be no live organ donations to anybody who's not your relative. The Philippines, it got so bad that the Philippines banned all organ transplants for anybody who's not a Filipino citizen in that country. And that took the number of organ transplants in that country way down. I don't have the exact numbers. Perhaps the worst part of that idea of biological trafficking is in China in terms of organ purchasing, where in China, they will actually, there have been credible report after report, they will take Falun Gong political prisoners or other prisoners, and somebody comes in and says, I want a liver, pays $100,000. They will tissue type the person needing the liver, and they will murder. They will kill the political prisoner for the liver. And that has been reported many times. And, you know, somebody might say, but I don't want to die. Yeah, well, you know, if you decide that you're going to make sure that somebody else dies so you can live in that circumstance, you know, if there's an eternal life, you're going to have a lot to be responsible for.
In every one of the cases that you talked about, Wesley, the included in the list of bad guys are the people paying money, the people who are using the prostitutes, the people who are buying the organs. I mean, it's supporting the business by having the money.
That's right, because you would not have human trafficking if it didn't pay a lot of money.
Yeah. Wow. And so you told us how to spot somebody who might be a victim of human trafficking. Let's see, how do I ask this question? All right, Robert and I we do a lot of interviews. We've had on the show brothel owners, and well, one in particular out in Nevada. He's a famous one. What's his name? Dennis?
No, Dennis. Yeah.
Okay. And apparently he's a celebrity, and if you read the book, the girls are all happy out there. Are those girls also kind of entrapped, or I'm just don't know. I mean, I can't imagine choosing that for a living.
Yeah. Well, you're talking about the famous. I forgot the name of the
Hoff. Dennis Hoff is his name.
I don't know whether that particular, obviously, I wouldn't be able to know whether the women who work there, because it's legal there, whether they're involved in trafficking. I would tend to probably doubt it in a place of that prominence. But when you go to the places of lower prominence, or if you go to places where the brothel in that particular Nevada County is legal, if you go to places where you're basically underground brothels, you're more likely to have that occur, I would think. But I don't know the answer to the question, to be honest.
I guess maybe my thought is that how does a guy live with himself knowing that he's contributing to this?
Well, it's human beings are fallible, and we have fears and we have needs, and sometimes we lose the sight of the fact that when you use somebody else in that kind of a horrible way, if there's such a thing as karma, it will come back and bite you in the neck.
Yes, I think so. All right, let me ask you something that's kind of an indirect support of this. I've heard stories of, let's say, respectable corporations that you can invest in, that among their holdings are some unrespectable publications, let's say pornography, things like that, because they make money. So if I invest in Corporation ABC, let's say, and I don't mean the network, I'm just making a name up. Is there a way for me to know if I'm not indirectly supporting or investing in something I wouldn't want to invest in?
Well, that's interesting. That gets into shareholder responsibility in terms of corporations. The guy who works a lot in that field is Ralph Nader, and perhaps Ralph Nader would be a good person for you to. I've written 4 books with Ralph, by the way. He's a wonderful wonderful man, and I think that's an important issue that he gets involved with.
Really,
the issue of shareholder responsibility for corporate behavior. Now, often what happens is that in corporations, shareholders don't have sufficient power to hold what the board of directors does accountable. But if that's an issue that you'd like to explore further, I would suggest Ralph would have a greater depth of knowledge than me.
If there is such a thing as a sting for human traffickers, and then they rescue the people that are being trafficked, are they able to find their families, or do they go into a rehabilitation program and try to come out as normal people and put under government hiding, like new identities and things?
There are a lot of different things that happen depending on circumstances. A lot of the work that helps the trafficked victims are private, like the National Human Trafficking Hotline. There's a lot of that. Obviously, there would be, if somebody is rescued by law enforcement, there would then be on the other side of that rescue, social services available to help them, counseling available to help them, hopefully reuniting with their families, and this kind of thing would be part of that. So there are a lot of very, very good private agencies that do this work, a lot of religious groups that try to help those who have been trafficked. And between government and between the private sector and the nonprofit sector, there's a lot of support for people like that. And I would love, again, if you are trafficked and you're listening to this broadcast and you think there's no hope, there is hope. And that phone number for you, if you are a victim, is 1-888-373-7888, 1-888-373-7888. And if you are, you think that maybe there's somebody, some business down the street that is forcing somebody into some forced labor situation, contact the Department of Homeland Security at 866-347-2423, 866-347-2423. Do not approach them yourself. That could be dangerous to you as well as the trafficked person. Let the professionals handle the enforcement aspect.
Well, there's nothing that we are more proud of as a communications vehicle than to be able to have somebody like yourself on the air to spread that word, Wesley. All right, let me wrap it up. We need, we gave us some great phone numbers. Do you want to give us any website? Discovery.org, I know, is the Discovery website. Anything else?
Discovery.org, right. Yeah, I write a lot on issues about assisted suicide, bioethics, radical environmentalism, the difference between animal rights and animal welfare. Those are not the same thing at all. And I have a Twitter account that I post all my articles, and if you want to follow me, it's at Forced Exit. Forced Exit is the title of one of my books against euthanasia. At Forced Exit. I'm also on Facebook. If you go to the corner on National Review Online, I post regularly there. I'm a blogger there, as well as a biweekly column in First Things.
And for those listening who want to share this message, we have recorded this, and it is available. It will be by 2 o'clock today as a podcast on YouTube and on Facebook. And Robin will make sure she puts it on all social media that we subscribe to here at the radio station, and we'll send it to you.
You could send that to me. I'll put it on my social media as well.
Oh, excellent! And then people can share it. And I put a nice photograph of you on the podcast so people can see what you look like. I hope that's you.
Airbrushed.
I put in your name. I hope that's you, Wesley. If it's not, let me know, and I'll have to change it. Wesley, thank you for the work you do, and on behalf of the Discovery, on behalf of WOCA, let me thank the Discovery Institute also for the work they do.
Well, thank you very much. We really appreciate your support.
All right, we will take a little break. We'll be right back. This is WOCA Ocala.
Weather is brought to you by myfwc.com. Safe boating goes no accident. On this Monday, it'll still be warm with clouds, even a brief shower or two in the highs in the